I feel so honored to be with you this morning. Good morning. There's a story that took place about 2,000 or 3,000 years ago in another land very distant from here. And it's a story about a farmer and his wife who had a horse and a son. And you might think, well, what's so unusual about that or important about that? In that particular time and land, a son and a horse were very important to a farmer. The horse was there to help till the land, and the son was expected to grow up and help on the farm and eventually take over the farm. So one day, the horse runs away. And all of the village people come to the farmer and his wife and say, "Oh, how terrible, this is awful. Now what are you going to do? You don't have a horse. This is awful." And the farmer says, "Maybe it is, and maybe it's not." The very next day, the horse returns home with a mare. So the villagers come in and they're celebrating and say, "How wonderful, now you have 2 horses. This is great news." The farmer says, "Maybe it is, and maybe it's not." One day the son, as he has grown older, he's out taming one of the horses, and he falls off the horse and breaks his leg. The villagers, again, come to say, offer their condolences and say, "Oh, we're so sorry that this happened. This is terrible news." And the farmer says, "Maybe it is, and maybe it's not." The very next day, the army comes through the village, and they're recruiting all of the available healthy young men to go to war. The villagers come back and say, "How wonderful. Look at your wonderful luck. How great this is." And the farmer says, Maybe it is, maybe it's not. So the point of that story is that we don't always know what's best for us. We may look at our circumstances and things going on around us, and we either think how awful or how wonderful, and they may be neither. So of course you can take this story on infinitum and go on and on with it. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. How do we know? I want to read to you. This was the daily word from July the 7th, and it just really got my attention. It says, "I choose joy. I may feel sadness, impatience, or even anger because of my life circumstances. But I recognize that these emotions are temporary, for my spirit will always naturally seek to express joy. True joy is not about outside circumstances. Rather, it is an inner awareness developed through consciousness. Inner joy is about my connection with God, with the truth of my being, with nature, and with all life. Undeterred by the opinions of others, or even by difficult circumstances, the peace I feel is the result of an inner decision to live my life in joy. Peace fills me, and a sense of purpose directs me. Because of my decision to choose joy in my life, I make a positive difference in the world." I want to share 3 letters with you today. The Apostle Paul loved to write letters. Part of his ministry was writing letters. He wrote letter after letter after letter. Of course, he spent a lot of time in prison, and so he had nothing better to do, so he wrote letters. Well, I'm no saint, but I do find letter writing to be very helpful and beneficial sometimes when I'm still trying to work through an emotional issue or something that maybe has happened in my life. But let's take a look at the first letter. And these letters were all written by the same person, to the same person, about the same situation. Letter number 1. Oh, let me invite you to put on a spiritual blanket for this first one, because you may not want to be splattered with some of this stuff that you'll hear in this first letter. So everybody just put your spiritual blanket on so you don't absorb any of this. Dear expletive.
I didn't know you had my letter.
I broke into your office. How dare you fire me? When I was one of the best employees at your company. I poured out my heart and soul into doing the best job that I could for you. If you had only given me the resources and the support that I needed, I could have done a better job. You'll be sorry you didn't give me a chance to succeed. May you rot in expletive and be miserable all the days of your life. Does this sound like the letter of someone who is better or bitter? Human beings are messy. The whole business of being human is a messy business. We get hurt, we hurt others. We get scared. There are all kinds of emotions that come up for us and thoughts that go through our minds, and we take things out on others, and others take things out on us. So being human is just plain messy, isn't it? You know, people don't always behave toward us in a way that's loving and compassionate. And when we are the recipient of those kinds of behaviors, one of the things that we can do is close down our hearts. And we can build a wall around our hearts, and we can allow those, what used to be a soft space in our hearts to harden. And that becomes bitterness. We may say things like, everybody's against me. Nobody understands me. Why is this happening to me again? When we react to life as if we have no control over it, or if we believe that we live in an unfriendly universe and everybody out there is bad, or people just don't behave the way we think they should, when we go at it from that belief system, we can develop a bitterness that just comes out in everything that we do. You ever know somebody like that in your life? That, they're just bitter about life in general, bitter about everything. There were 3 salesmen, and they were traveling, and had been traveling all week. And one was a Hindu, one was a Jew, and the third was a negativist. So it was Friday afternoon. They were done for the week, and they were traveling on this dusty country road in a rental car, and the car broke down. So of course the negativist is like, "Geez, what are we going to do now? This is horrible. This is awful. Oh my gosh." And he's just complaining the whole time. And they get out of the car and they start walking. And after about 30 minutes, they come to a farmhouse. There's a theme this morning about farms. I don't know. So they knock on the door, and finally the old farmer comes to the door, and they explain their situation to him. And he says, "Well, you're not going to find a hotel around here anywhere. So, it's late in the evening, so I tell you what I can offer you. I've got 2 beds in the house, and I've got a spare bunk in the barn. And you're welcome, to those." So the Hindu says, "Well, I'll go sleep in the barn. I don't mind doing that." So everybody bunks down. He goes out to the barn. About 30 minutes later, there's a tap, tap, tap on the door. They all go to the door. And the Hindu salesman says, "I'm so sorry, I can't stay in the barn because in my religion, cows are sacred and there's a cow in the barn." So the Jew says, no problem, no problem. I'll go out to the barn and I'll sleep out there. And so everybody bunks back down again, and 30 minutes later, knock, knock, knock on the door. They all go to answer the door, and the Jew says, I thought I could do it. I'm so sorry, but, in my religion, pigs are unclean, so I can't sleep in the barn. So the negativist is like, all right, already, I'll go sleep in the barn. So he goes out, he's grumbling, he's complaining the whole way out there, and, he's just mad, and it's like, I just want to get some sleep. So everybody bunks back down. About 30 minutes later, tap, tap, tap at the door. They go down to answer the door. It's the pig and the cow. Have you ever known anybody like that? So, when life hits us square in the face, when things happen to us that, that we don't expect or we don't see coming or we don't understand, what if we could choose in that moment, or even maybe a few moments later or a few days later, what if we could choose, though, to be better over bitter? What if we could choose? Letter number 2. Dear John, I regret that things did not work out between us. I tried my best to do a good job, but understand that it was not what you needed. I know you did what you needed to do by relieving me of my position. I have not been happy here for a while myself, as things have been so stressful, and I know that it was beginning to show in my work. I now have an opportunity to find what is best for me. Sincerely. You notice the difference in first letter and second letter? Now, the second letter, same situation, same thing happened. But in the second letter, this person is owning some responsibility and owning a place that they can say, well, okay, so this didn't work out for us, but here's an opportunity. They found some good in the situation. In Jeremiah 29:11, the prophet Jeremiah writes to the survivors that Nebuchadnezzar had exiled from Jerusalem to Babylon. And he says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future." Then in verse 13, he goes on to say, "You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart." So we look at what's in our hearts. And if all that we can find in our hearts is this hardened stone of bitterness where we've just turned against the world and we've shut everything out and everybody out because we're afraid that we might get hurt again, and it's closed off, then it's very difficult to find our own Christ nature and our Christ light within. It's difficult to find our love that we once knew, that we all have that soft place in our hearts, but if we've closed it off, we don't recognize it. It's become hardened and bitter. But when we can truly seek and know that what is meant for us is good, then we can begin to go within our hearts and find that good. And then from the modern day prophet Ronald Reagan, one of the favorite stories that he loved to tell, and I'm sure many of you have heard this story, but there was a set of twin boys, and they were complete polar opposites. One was a pessimist and one was an optimist. So the concerned parents took them to a psychiatrist one day. It's like, they're so different. Can you just test them and make sure that everything is okay? And, so the doc says, sure, fine. So he starts out with the little boy who's the pessimist, and he tries this experiment. So he takes him to this room that's filled to the ceiling with brand new toys. And the little boy goes in, and he comes right back out, and he's crying. And the psychiatrist says, but what's wrong? He said, if I play with those toys, I might break them. So then he goes to the second little boy, the optimist, and he takes him to a completely different room. And in that room, it's filled to the ceiling with horse manure. And the little boy climbs up to the top of the heap, and he starts scooping away, scoop by scoop, and he's just laughing the whole time. And the psychiatrist says, what are you doing? And the little boy says, with all this manure, I know there's a pony in here somewhere. So what are you looking for today? How are you looking at a circumstance or a situation? When we can find the good in our circumstances, and believe me, it is there. In the moment, we may not see it. In the moment, we may not feel it. But if it's true that God wants for us what is for our good and not evil, not bad, and it doesn't mean that bad things aren't going to happen. It doesn't mean that all sorts of things aren't going to come our way and circumstances are just, happen around us, and we don't have control around all the circumstances in our lives. And it also does not mean that we skip over the feelings when they do come up. We don't want to do what we call spiritual bypassing. When we're grieving, when we're hurting, when we're in pain, when we're angry, it doesn't mean that we just, say, oh, but I'm in unity, so I don't feel those feelings. We are in this human form. And it's important that because we have emotional energy from things, it's important that we allow that energy to come forth and we acknowledge it. And anything that comes up for us, it comes up for healing. So when we can allow those things to come up and nurture ourselves, and sometimes it means, yelling and screaming, if that's what it takes to help get some of the emotion out, then that's what we do. But we don't want to stay stuck in it. The 23rd Psalm says, we walk through the valley of the shadow of death. It doesn't say we pitched a tent and camped out there. We keep on going. We keep on going. I added a third B to this talk. It's called blessed. The third letter, dear sweet child of God, thank you for this wonderful opportunity to move on with my life, for the opportunity to find what brings me joy and to serve others in a way that feels more meaningful to me. I am grateful to have had this opportunity to work for you, for it has shown me that I am no longer happy doing this work, and there are more fulfilling ways that I can earn a living. By being relieved of this position, I can let go of the stress of it and fill my days with work that is full of joy and passion. I pray peace and success for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. So we close that letter with blessings. We can choose to move out of bitterness and away from bitterness to finding the good And in any moment, I can choose to be bitter or better. And then if I so choose, I can even move to find the blessing and know that I am always blessed. You know, sometimes we get so used to hearing things and like, how are you? I'm fine. How are you? I'm fine. And we just kind of move through life as robots, and we don't really stop and think about words and what they mean. And the word blessing and be blessed, that has become, very popular thing to say, and sometimes we hear it and it's like, yeah, okay, thank you, I guess that sounds good. But what does it really mean? It's kind of like, I don't know if you saw the movie The Last Word with Shirley MacLaine. It's a wonderful movie. She ends up at some point playing a disc jockey, and she is in the early morning hours, and she's on the radio, and she says, I would say have a great day, but don't have a great day. Have a day that matters. And I thought about that, and I started thinking about what does it mean to be blessed or have a blessing. According to Merriam-Webster, the definition of blessing is a thing that is conducive to one's happiness or welfare. So if we look for and find the good, and then we can get to a place of letting go of the emotional energy and the attachment, then we can get to better, and then we can, then we can even offer a blessing to those who have harmed us. And that's when we get the true blessing. Back in Jeremiah, again, 29:7, says, also seek the peace and prosperity of the city to which I have carried you into exile. Pray to the Lord for it, because if it prospers, you too will prosper. In the book that we give out to new members, Discover the Power Within You, Eric Butterworth puts a new light on the Beatitudes. And in the Beatitudes, in Matthew, they all start with blessed are, blessed are, blessed are. I'm going to share with you just a few of Eric Butterworth's new versions of the attitudes of being. And I've made a gift for all of you, and these are printed out on the table in the lobby, so feel free to take one as you leave. They're on pink paper. Just to share with you, attitudes of being. I am grateful for challenges that lead me beyond my extremity to God's opportunity. I am in tune with God. That which is God-inspired and God-directed shall prevail. I seek with all my heart and mind, and I shall find. I am a child of God, and I act like one. I am a radiating center of peace and love. So may you be blessed today. Find the blessing in whatever circumstance you may be in today. And I offer you the blessing of peace and joy, and knowing that we can choose in each moment. Thank you.